Hello, welcome back to another episode of Off the Donut. Today we're joined with Evan from Nonfiction. You can say hi.
What's up, Dave? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. It's a pleasure. Nonfiction is an alternative emo indie rock band based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Between their visual aesthetic, incredibly energetic on-stage presence, and somehow even more beautiful music, the ensemble consistently creates tunage that yearns to be driven to be played while observing and experiencing something greater than oneself. Following up their debut EP, Same Pain, in 2019, the group released their debut album, I Painted This One Blue, last year, November of 2022, which you can stream on all services and buy on a cassette tape on their Bandcamp. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. So we always start off with the bev and the snack check. I have some water with me today, as always, and some grapes. I like the red ones better, but we didn't have any, so.
I'm more of a red grapes guy myself, too. I'm still working on the rest of my coffee here. And, oh man, I'm snackless. I'm I'm sorry. I got the note and everything. I got the memo and I didn't bring one.
It's okay. A previous guest on the podcast, a previous guest on the podcast described themselves as the snack, so we can go with that for today too.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm the snack.
So, yeah. My first question that I always ask artists is where their name came from. So why Nonfiction?
It was definitely like a placeholder. I think it was a pretty meaningless, I mean, maybe not meaningless, but we didn't put a lot of thought into it. But as we grew as a band over time, we definitely started to like assign meaning to it, which has like grown and changed over the years. It's been like 4 years since we started. And so like right now, I think what it means to me is I kind of like the irony that when your story comes from your own kind of limited perspective, there's an inherent amount of truth that you lose to the things you might not understand or perceive at the time. And so like everyone's true story still contains plenty of like their own fiction. So I think that's kind of like, if it had to have a meaning, that's sort of like what I've assigned to it, but it could be different for the other guys. And it's definitely always changing.
Cool. Very cool. I didn't think about it like that, but that makes a lot of sense. So currently there are 6 members in the band. That's kind of fluctuated throughout the years, including Sean McCall, who, among other things, does a lot of other stuff. How did you guys meet each other, and how did the band form from that?
Oh gosh, so we all go back pretty far. I've known Joey since we were both in high school. We went to different schools, but we knew a lot of the same people. And I was like 17, and I think I was like 17, maybe 18. And I bought like a mixing console. And so like I wanted to record a band, and through a mutual friend, I met Joey's band at the time, Thought Patterns. They're like a math rock band. And I recorded their 2 albums. And Joey was like 15, but he was so good at drums that we asked him to join my band at the time, which was called Weatherhead. And so Joey and I met Sean at the Fire in like 2014, 2015, maybe. He was in a band called Breaking Tradition at the time, and we were playing with Weatherhead. And that was just sort of where I made the connection. It wasn't until a few years later that Sean was starting an indie pop project called FV with Tim Waldron, who's now in a band called Courier Club.
Yeah, cool guy.
So they asked me to join because Weatherhead had just broken up, and which is where I met Alex, because he was briefly the bassist of FV right before he moved to Columbus. So I met him at band practice. And then we went on this like totally doomed DIY tour that like trauma bonded us all. We like stayed in like a meth lab kind of house in Alabama after a show.
Oof.
It was just like I'll sleep in some filth, you know, like if I gotta, like, you know, you're on the road, you do what you gotta do. But like
the grit.
Dude, this was bad. Like it was just so gross, and we didn't feel safe, and it was really scary. We were all really young and stupid. So we all met Connor through his video project, Cemetery Tapes. and he was filming an FV set when I met him. We ended up making a bunch of really fun videos, like music videos and just like fun promo stuff for that video. Connor's always had a really cool artistic mind like that. And so Alex moved to Columbus, FV broke up eventually. Oh, Rin was FV's street team manager for a while too, which they started doing for school. And then we just like kept working with Rin on everything until, you know, by the time we were working in nonfiction, we were all really close friends. But so, yeah, so the FV breaks up, blah, blah, blah. Joey and I hadn't spoken in years. And so I just hit him up because I missed playing music with him. And I started writing some songs and was sending them around to my friends. So Joey came over one day, we were jamming. A few weeks later, Connor joined in. He had been wanting to like learn how to play bass. And eventually Sean joined, and we played as a 4-piece for a while for like Same Pain and everything. And then Alex moved in with me in Philly a couple years later, and he joined almost immediately just because he was like our homie. So that's kind of the long, convoluted story, I guess, how we met.
Oh, very cool. It's the DIY scene is interesting like that, kind of how it all comes together in like unexpected ways. So it's always cool to like hear about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's like the kind of baseball stats.
You guys should do cards. It could be cool as a little merch thing or whatever. Yeah. So the album traverses a range of sounds. It goes through various post-hardcore breakdowns at the end of Mr. Cogito and What Gnaws at Me. There's these sort of almost country-like ballads in LCL and Atacama, and a lot of indie rock in No Shade in Your Ear. What are some of your musical inspirations overall? The bands that kind of went into this, again, overall, or for I Painted This One Blue specifically?
I mean, so like my first favorite band was The Cure. I grew up, my dad got me into like a lot of the 80s kind of post-punky shit, and me and Joey had bonded over that a lot when we met. But I think like for the 5 of us, when we were really like starting to figure each other out musically, our big overlap was like the emo indie rock stuff that we had gotten into in high school, like Brand New, Balance Composure, Title Fight, you know, Manchester Orchestra, all that kind of like big rock.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of shit. But then during the pandemic and after, you know, we'd been playing music for kind of a little bit, and I think we were getting we felt kind of pigeonholed and just really interested in music that wasn't music that we were making. And so when Alex and I were living together during the pandemic, we would wake up and listen to a new album or two like every single day. Like it'd be some classic rock record we had never heard before, hip hop, IDM, jazz, like anything that, like Joey's always been like a music encyclopedia, so he's usually like putting us onto the good shit. So like, the pandemic I think was a big turning point where we kind of were like, it's all just like sounds, and you can take like, you kind of collage a lot of different things together and make kind of a cornucopia of sorts with it. And I think that's sort of like what makes the album have the sort of, I don't know if it's like that eclectic, but it's just got some different aspects to it. I think that's because we're just drawing from so many places at that point.
Yeah. So there's also a lot of or just overall kind of with that, there's an incredibly professional, very cohesive feel to everything non-musical you guys also put out. Is there someone that consistently does the visual side of things, whether that be photography, merch designs, album art, or does it kind of depend on what you're going for that piece, that project?
Probably more that. I think it's like we all work on all of it together, even if someone's contribution is just sort of being a part of the conversation that goes into like the, the sort of like idea behind what we end up doing. I think the cohesiveness comes from the fact that we're all being pretty involved in it, as well as just certain steps that we take. Like Joey is our graphic designer. He does all the merch and like a lot of the flyers, and I think his touch on everything definitely kind of brings some of that cohesion together. But I think that we've always just kind of shared the role of art direction because we think the vision is something that we kind of share together. It's not something that we sort of give to one person. And we also like to work with people outside of the band as well. Just visual artists that we really like. Like we've worked with Hannah Altman a lot, the photographer, for a lot of like the promos that we've done. Our friend Rachel Lee did that beautiful backdrop kind of crayon image that's in one of our pictures. And so these were kind of ideas we talked together as a band and then worked with others to make.
Cool. Yeah, that was kind of what I meant in that like outsourcing sort of. But
yeah, we definitely do that sometimes. And like with like the recording stuff, like there's Sean and I and Connor too are audio engineers, and so we'll do all the demoing and a lot of we recorded a lot of the stuff that is actually on the album, but then obviously outsourced, some of the stuff we wanted to sound like really fucking good, outsource that to better people.
Yeah, it makes everything cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, we still spend way too much money on our record.
Yeah, but that's how it be sometimes. You get
Yeah,
excited.
it would have been more.
You know?
It would have been more for sure.
Yeah, cool. There is, to say the least, an excess of religious imagery, reference, and trauma throughout the record. In Mr. Cogito, there's the phrase, "You pulled the thorns out of your side and shaped them into a crown and spent the rest of your life living it down." There's pretty much the entirety of No Shade. And in your ear, which is specifically about leaving the church, there's the phrase, "Eyes fixed on the horizon for your Messiah." Can you talk a little bit more about how that relates to the overall album's themes and the messages that come throughout it?
Yeah, I mean, so like I grew up living on a church property. My dad was what was called an elder in the church council, and I became a worship leader in the youth group as soon as I was like old enough. Yeah, I was kind of like groomed to be like the music boy for the church. And so it was just like all I knew for a really long time was like theology. And so but I was always like, I have always been a person that likes to like test the limits of like every possible thing. Like, you say this is true, is it true in like this circumstance as well? And so like with the evangelical Christianity that I was brought up in, you're not really supposed to like challenge it because you'll find, issues. You'll find some problematic conflicts,
inconsistencies.
Inconsistencies. That's exactly it. And so it was definitely it's the framework within which I think, and so like that's also how I write, but it's also something that I've always been trying to like be free of and exist outside of at the same time. I think there's a tension there where a lot of the album's emotion kind of comes from.
Yeah, it's not specifically Catholic guilt, but something of the sort.
Yeah, we were evangelical, but Jesus stuff.
All that fun Jesus stuff.
Yeah.
What is what's the significance of Narrowsburg, New York? Because the album ends with the song titled as such, in which the phrase I painted this one blue actually comes from. And the cassette version of the album features a "Welcome to Narrowsburg" sign pretty much just on the entire cover.
Yeah, well, when we started the band, one of our goals was to do like a writing, recording, demoing kind of retreat. And that is what Same Pain is what we made on our very first one. And so after Same Pain, we returned to the same cabin, which is in Narrowsburg. It's a beautiful little town in just south of the Catskills. Um, and we wrote a lot of the music for the full length for I Painted This One Blue in the subsequent trips out there. And so it was just like a place to detach, you know, like living in the city, having like kind of like the routines of your life, taking yourself out of those and being in nature somewhere really beautiful with people you love, having to cook all your own food, and just really have nothing to do but make music was super helpful. I think it's where we got a lot closer as people, which made the music more fun to make and come a lot more naturally.
Yeah, definitely. How many times have you gone overall?
I think we went 5 times. That might be maybe four. The first one was pretty short. We made Same Pain in like 4 days. It was just like a really quick trip. And then as we would
Did you record it there too?
Yeah.
Oh, so
just
you
about entirely.
In like, wow.
I came back and did the vocals at home, and we mixed it at home. But yeah, we made it really, really fast. We had written some stuff like right before we went, but it was a quick process. Versus, you know, I Painted This One Blue was the exact opposite. It was like 2 years of like taking trips out the cabin, coming back, working on whatever we had started there for like the next several months, coming back and forth.
How long were you guys usually there for? Was it around like 4 or 5 days?
The longest one was like maybe like 8 to 10 days, which was great. The longer you can, I find like the longer I can stay detached from the world, like the deeper I can go into it and like really feel comfortable to create what I want to create and feel really like myself.
Yeah, you don't have the thought of having to leave like as far up in your mind. It's easier to like kind of stay in the moment, I guess.
Absolutely.
Word. So the record has overall a theme of confliction, in many cases having moved away from a scenario or environment that was destructive and choosing to either see the good that came from it instead, reaching a level of comfort, or continuing to feel forms of guilt and conflict and process through it. With that, there's this really interesting dichotomy between the colors yellow and blue throughout the album. It's obviously titled I Painted This One Blue, but the album cover itself is, for all but the cassette tape version of it, features a primarily yellow Polaroid, which is also something of note that the cassette doesn't. There's then the song God Wanted Yellow, which again goes back to the religious aspect. For me, I think this demonstrated this conflict really well, with God wanting yellow, having it be yellow, and yet proclaiming the opposite entirely, that it is blue, presenting this sort of like thin veil of a mask almost put up to protect vulnerabilities. Now, maybe I just interpreted all of that entirely wrong, but assuming that I didn't, could you speak a little bit more about some of those themes of conflict, how it's ultimately manifested in the songs and the cover itself, and any kind of closure you think may stem from it?
I think that's a great interpretation. Like whatever, if it means that to you, that like probably like that means equal to whatever like the words meant to me as they got put down on paper, you know, or Google Docs. But like I think the decision to invoke that kind of cognitive dissonance in the art direction was definitely a deliberate and intentional one. We had talked a lot about like, you know, just talking about like truth and like thought and like what you know, what it really means to be honest. And I think for me, I was going through a lot of like frustrations because I was told the world is one way and not to think about it. And then I, you know, went to public school and met other people, and then I moved away and I met even more other people and found that there are like way more ways of seeing things than I was told there were. And to kind of like unify the world you believed in as a child with the world you see afterward, I think is sort of the struggle going on there. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I think so. Kind of again, just like working through, like as you said, what you've been presented with versus like what actually can happen after that.
Yeah, like what do I want to believe in now that it seems like there's so many different things that you could, and also like, you know, you don't want to cause harm, you know, and like a lot of like the ways the Christian church especially, you know, looks at like gender roles and like gender in general, and not only cause harm to like another because it's a problematic way of like seeing other people in with such limitations, but also like more importantly like yourself, you know, like if you think you're supposed to be a certain way, then you're gonna ignore a certain element of possibility in your life that could be really potential or could be really important for you to find out who you are.
Right. Yeah, those like forced boundaries almost.
Right.
And denial and whatnot.
And why would you want to like limit yourself, you know, when you could be more than that?
Cool. So this last one isn't really a question. I just want to talk about the album because I think it's really good.
Thank you.
It is really good. Same Pain was, I think, really really instrumental, like as an introduction to the band. But the progression from that to I Painted This One Blue is so natural and so easy, and it still sounds really, really good. The production on it's beautiful. The inclusion of other instruments, there's the pedal steel guitar or the slide guitar, something of the sort. There are trumpets and horns on it and strings throughout the record, and it just makes it feel so lush and rich with like texture and sound. And then on top of which the composition of all the individual songs, how they play as separate pieces of work and into one another, finally as the whole album, it just works really, really, really well. So, you know, good job.
Thank you, for real.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm really glad you like it. We spent a long time trying to make it that way.
I think it turned out, you know, beautifully. So those are all the questions that I have for you. This is your time to plug any social media, any other links or merch that you guys have, any other news of stuff that you're working on for the future, whatever you want.
Yeah, totally. Let's see. So I am mixing an album for Connor. Connor joined another band. They're called Foxglove. I'm mixing their album right now. It's super, super great. Definitely check it out when it comes out. The person who played cello all over I Painted This One Blue is named Alyssa Almeida. I co-produced her first record along with Alex, worked on that with us as well. And I'm just finishing up the mix right now. So that'll come out probably in the next few months. And that's amazing. She's just so talented. It's a cellist first, I guess, and there's a lot of cello on it, but there's like a bunch of other instruments as well. It's just fantastic. Sean is in Sweet Pill and 2319. They're always doing things. Sweet Pill just dropped a record, and 2319 has an EP coming out soon. Joey makes shirts. They're dope. Eaten by Worms at Big Cartel, I think. He probably has like a cool bootleg of your favorite band's shirt that you might want to buy. And then Alex and I have Comfort, our other band. We put out a mixtape a year ago, and we've got a lot of songs in the chamber, but haven't come out yet. So we'll probably be dropping some new comfort stuff eventually too. But yeah, that's all I got.
Well, thank you again for joining me today. I really appreciate it. You guys can find all the stuff that's been on the screen and everything else down in the description below. Check them out. You know, the album's good and whatnot. So it'll be worth your time. Thank you again for watching. Thank you again for joining me. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for having me. I'll see you later.